Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the September 13th meeting of the Dartmouth School Committee to order. Per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, Section 20, and the legislature's extension of that order, the public will not be allowed to physically access the school committee meeting. Members of the public can access the meeting via live stream at www.youtube.com/DHS TV In addition, the event will be rebroadcast on DCTV channels 9 and 18 on the following days: Wednesday and Thursday at 5 p.m., Friday at 6 a.m., Saturday at 8 a.m., and Sunday at 2 p.m. The school committee reserves the right to implement additional remote participation procedures and will notify the public of these practices as soon as practicable. I'd like to invite everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to ask everyone to remain standing, and I'd like to have a moment of silence for the victims of 9/11 and also for Dartmouth's own Leah Oliver, I'm sorry. Thank you. You may be seated. All right, so I just want to remind the public that comments are welcome during our meeting. Please forward comments to the recording secretary, Kathleen Genthner, at dartmouthschools.org. Ms. Genthner forwards all emails that she receives to everyone on the school committee, so if you want to comment on something that is on our agenda this evening, please email her with those comments. Ms. Genthner, have you received any comments so far this evening?
I have not.
Okay, I will return to you at the end of the meeting and see if you have received anything during our meeting. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Nunes. I'm out of it today. Ms. Genthner, can we have a roll call, please?
Shannon Jenkins.
Here.
Mary Waite. Here. Kathleen Amaral.
Here.
John Nunes.
Yep.
Chris Oliver.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Nunes. Now I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular session of August 23rd, 2021.
So moved. Second.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Nunes and a second by Mr. Oliver. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I will
Abstentions? And one abstention. All right, so that motion carries with 4 in favor and 1 abstention from Mr. Oliver. All right, next up we have our student representative report, and we're joined tonight by Josh Moniz. I'm super excited. I coached Josh in soccer many years ago, so I'm excited to see him here all grown up. Sorry, Josh, for embarrassing you. Please just maybe introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and then go ahead and give your report.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joshua Moniz. I'm a senior at Dartmouth High School. I'm honored to serve as a representative to the student body on the school committee. I would like to give you an update on what is going on at Dartmouth High. The school year kicked off on September 1st with an extended advisory and class assemblies. Administration reviewed some points of emphasis for this school year, and our class focused on building relationships and getting to know one another. Our athletic teams are in full swing with several items off to strong starts, including our football team, which had a 35-0 opening win over Bishop Stang last Friday night. The game featured a back-to-school bash with inflatables, lawn games, a DJ, and more. It was a fun night for the DHS community. This past Friday, September 10th at 8:46 a.m., Dartmouth High School observed a moment of silence to remember those who lost their lives during the September 9/11 attacks, in addition to honoring first responders who served and sacrificed their lives in response to the attacks. Mr. Tebow shared the story of Leah Oliver, a Dartmouth High graduate who lost her life while working on the 96th floor of the World Trade Center during the 9/11 attacks. Her memory lives on in the Dartmouth community with a memorial in front of the front steps leading to the student parking lot and the Leah Oliver Scholarship awarded yearly. Summer reading book talks will take place during the PACE period on the early release day this Wednesday, September 15th. Students will meet with their book sponsors for a discussion about their book. For the first time ever, students were able to sponsor books for summer reading, and they will be hosting discussions as well. I look forward to the opportunity to lead a discussion with my peers about Sully by John Grisham this coming Wednesday. Coming up, there will be a Clubs and Activities Expo. I encourage all students to find a club or activity to join. There's a club or activity for everyone, and if there isn't, then students can create one. We added 6 new clubs and activities last year. Students with questions about clubs and activities can either speak with the club advisor or contact Mr. Shea. On Wednesday, October 13th, all sophomores and juniors will take the PSAT and MSQT exam. This is not only good practice for upcoming SATs, but it also provides juniors an opportunity to qualify for a National Merit Scholarship. That concludes my update on Dartmouth High School. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you so much, Josh. Does anybody have any comments, questions?
Welcome
Mr.
aboard.
Oliver?
Yeah, I'll just very quickly say, great to meet you, Josh. Welcome aboard. Looking forward to hearing your reports.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
Mr.
As you, Dr. Jenkins, I have the privilege of having Josh in the high school band for the past 5 years, so you're right, you see him grow up, and when I saw on the agenda that he was the new student rep, I was thrilled, so we're very fortunate to have him. I look forward to his reports throughout the upcoming year.
Yep, thank you. Nice to see you. It's been a few years, but nice to see you and have you here reporting on all the goings-on of the high school.
Yes. Thank you, Josh. It's amazing that you guys are all seniors, so it's going to be an exciting year for you, and we're happy to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just say thank you again, like my colleagues. It's great to have you on board. As I said earlier, you're welcome to stay if you want, if you would like to see how it all works, but you're also welcome to go because I know you're probably very busy and have a lot of homework. So either way is fine. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to meet you all.
You
Good
too.
night, safe travels.
All right, next on our agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gifford for the welcome and introduction of new teachers. Such a fun time of the
It
year.
is. You're right. We always look forward to this time of year. I'll just mention that, as you know, in the past, Mrs. Oliveira has done all of the yeoman's work for the Project Time work. This year, we made the decision to ask, or at least, see if a couple of our teachers wanted to take some of the lead on that and run the meetings and form those relationships. So we're very happy to have Miss Janine Tavares as well as Miss Kelly Duart. Miss Kelly Duart's doing the secondary level coordinator, and Janine is working as the elementary coordinator. So they're great assistants, and I'm sure they've done a great job. I know they have. I've observed a little bit of it, but done a great job planning meetings for the teachers and making sure that they all feel welcome and have good mentors for the year. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for having us. We're going to start by introducing our elementary level new teachers. And our first teacher is Jennifer Fitton. She is the DeMello math coach, and her mentor is Jen Clune. And then we have Deborah McGillick. She is the math specialist at DeMello, and her mentor, come on, come on over. Her mentor is Liz Vosi.
Hi.
And then our last teacher at DeMello is Danielle Karen. She's teaching grade 3, and her mentor is Leslie Gamache. And so now we'll move to Potter. We have Rachel Farmer teaching 4th grade, and her mentor is Lori Murphy. Come right next to me. Here we go. Thanks, ladies.
Mr. Galashaw is like Pat
Yeah.
Sajak.
Yes,
Yes, doing a great job.
Mark.
And then we have a special education teacher, Kaylee Stevenson at Potter, and her mentor is Michelle Dias. Also, Caitlin Durand is a 5th grade teacher at Potter, and also Michelle is her mentor as well. So we'll move on to Quinn Elementary, and we have Bethany Dumont, who is teaching grade 4, and Veronica Smith, who is teaching grade 5, and their mentor, a little closer, and their mentor is Paul Paveo. Next at Quinn, we have Taylor Saltmarsh and Keisha Julian, both teaching 5th grade, and their mentor is Wendy Candeas. Then we have Brian Wilderman. He is a sped teacher in 5th grade. His mentor is Shannon Salvador. She could not be with us tonight, but here's Brian. And we have Ashley Raposo, who is the PALS teacher at Quinn, and her mentor is Lindsay Vafides. Moving to district and/or Cushman, we have Kerry Walsh and Hannah Ranker, who are both speech language pathologists, and their mentor is Lori Dionisio. And then we have Kristen Green, who is a team facilitator, and Elizabeth DeBarros, who is an occupational therapist, and their mentor is Lori O'Neill.
Closer.
Closer to me. Come on over, come on over.
Don't bite.
And then our last new teacher at the elementary level is Megan Phillips. She is a physical education and wellness teacher at Cushman, and her mentor is Paul Paveo.
Doing double duty.
And that's all of our new elementary people.
Okay, moving on to Dartmouth Middle School, we have Matthew Doan, and his mentor is Joseph Silvio. Matthew Doan will be teaching grade 6. Next up is William Garcia. He's the Dartmouth Middle School social worker with his mentor, Daniel Lefebvre. Then we have Francis Gothier, who is our grade 6 special ed teacher, and Linda De Silva Medeiros, who is our grade 7 special ed teacher. Their mentor, Lisa Katz-Turgeon, could not be here today. At the high school, we have Laura Long, who is the high school psychologist, and her mentor is Caitlin Colbeck. You're on candid camera. Next up, we have Amy Gleicher with her mentor, Catherine Thomas, and she is the Dartmouth High School social worker. Next up, we have Samuel Bianco and Nicole Seamus. Samuel is our chorus teacher at the high school, and Nicole Seamus is a physical education teacher. Their mentor is Deborah August. Next up, we have Nathan Cavallo and Jason Borges. They're both our high school World of Language teachers, and their mentor is Hillary Souza.
Great.
Next up is Jarrett Brown. He is the Dartmouth High School physics teacher, and the mentor is Douglas Smith. Next up is Michael Jeggers. He is our Dartmouth High School guidance counselor, and his mentor is Nicole Heath. Next up, and I think it's our last one. Yep, it's our last one, Amy Career. She is the Dartmouth High School special ed step-up teacher, and her mentor is Lily Chamberlain.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Would any of my committee members like to make a comment?
You want me to start, or?
Go ahead, Mr. Oliver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, first of all, to both of you for organizing this and, pitching in and doing the program. I always enjoy, and this is for everyone who has since left, but I always enjoy reading the biographies.
All the spotlights.
And all the spotlights, exactly. It's amazing to see the type of talent that we're able to get in Dartmouth. So, I always enjoy these nights. It's unfortunate that we couldn't have the reception that we typically do, but it's great to be in person and be able to see them, at least come through and walk through and get to put a name with a face. So it's just exciting. It's an exciting time, always having new, fresh educators come in. So that's all I have. Thank you to everyone, and welcome aboard to the Dartmouth Public Schools.
Yeah, no, I will kind of echo Mr. Oliver's comments. Welcome aboard. It's great to, see all these new teachers, and it's always thrilling that, they want to come work for us type of deal, and glad to see it. And thank you to Jamie and Kelly for Janine.
Yeah.
Sorry, for doing this and taking the lead in that this year. So it's appreciated. It's a lot of work, but the teachers, they learn a lot from it, and the mentors help them out. So that's always great. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, it is always great to see the new faces and who they're paired up with and for mentoring and great matches and some folks doing some double duty there. I noticed Mr. Paveo. Yeah, I love it. My sixth grader has one of the new educators that she thinks he's wonderful so far. So good, right? So that's all we can ask for. And good luck to all of them. Thank you for organizing this.
Yes, thank you so much for putting this together. I know having, as a teacher, it certainly is so important to have mentors, that are there to support you, someone that, when you're coming to a new environment that you can lean to and to have, it's critical. So we really appreciate to see this program, coming to fruition and again, that support network continuing. And it's just so great to see so much excitement this year and these new faces coming in and that energy. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll just echo what my colleagues have said. Thank you so much. And please, at your next meeting, tell all the new teachers and the mentors how grateful we are. We didn't have a chance to, thank them because they were running through, but we're super excited to have them on board. And so please convey our appreciation for both the new teachers and for the mentors.
We will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Good job. All right, so the next item on our agenda is a resolution about the Dartmouth Memorial Stadium renovation Phase 2. Mr. Kiley, I'll hand that over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. So this is exciting. It's been a while since we've talked about the stadium project. Obviously, for those who were lucky enough to be at the game Friday night, we get to enjoy our field, but it also puts the microscope on the rest of the project. Every time we're in that facility, it's obvious that, we still need to address some other issues besides the field itself. So we are excited to move the project forward. The first part of our plan to do that is to consider this resolution before you. So I will read that and then answer any questions you may have. So it's resolution number 22-1. It's a resolution awarding a contract for the construction of the Dartmouth Memorial Stadium storage building. Whereas bids for the Dartmouth Memorial Stadium storage building project were duly advertised and bids received were opened at 2 p.m. Thursday, August 12th. And whereas the bid from J.J. Cardozi, Inc., 150 Emerald Street, Riverside, Rhode Island, was reviewed and deemed to have met the published specifications, therefore be it resolved that a contract for the Dartmouth Memorial Stadium storage building be awarded to J.J. Cardozi, Inc., Riverside, Rhode Island, based on Dartmouth Public Schools specifications dated June 23rd, 2021, for the amount of $1,675,000.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Nunes. Can I get a second?
You beat me to it. Kathleen.
So I have a motion by Mr. Nunes, a second by Ms. Amaral. Do you guys have comments, questions, discussion? Mr. Nunes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, through you to Mr. Kiley, when, for getting the two high bidders type of deal, it's, it was nice to see that per se, everybody was kind of in the ballpark. I mean, when you've got $119,000, on a project that size from 1 to 4, that's, at least you know that everybody's in, those four were in, everybody saw the same thing.
Right.
In the blueprint, so.
Mr. Oliver, or Mr. Nunes, I'm sorry, did you have another?
No, I'm good.
Okay, Mr. Oliver.
Oh, that's
Thank-
good. Good.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Yeah, I'll just say that I had a great opportunity to speak with Mr. Kiley as well as Mr. Tattlebaum and Mr. Mickelson, who's also part of the turf field committee. And, we had some good conversations. While this was certainly a little bit higher number than what we were anticipating, it's still, like Mr. Nunes said, especially in this day and age right now with everything going on and just materials elevated across the board, that I'm very comfortable and confident with this number. And I got to give credit to Mr. Kiley for the work that he's done to get this project rolling again. As you know, the town meeting awarded us the money a couple of years, seems like a couple of years now, right around 2 years. So it's exciting to continue, get the project back on track, and let's finish it up. So I'll just add a couple of other thoughts afterwards.
Thank you. Samuel, no, can I just ask you, before we go back to Mr. Nunes, can you remind viewers what the scope of is the project in Phase 2? And then also, we know what the cost was, remind everyone what town meeting allocated for us.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, town meeting allocated $3.6 million for the next phase of the project. And the next phase encompasses the repairs to the structures themselves, the concrete stands, the bathrooms, the concessions, the storage component, the concourses in and around the stadium. So really everything else that needs to get done. This is a piece of that, to be followed by another bid in which we would then proceed to concrete work. The renovations are significant that need to take place. The bathroom component of the facility needs to be expanded greatly, which necessitated us eliminating the storage component in the existing structure because we need the space for the bathrooms. So this is sort of a step in that process. But I just want to assure everybody that we are moving forward with the design of the remainder of the facility. We haven't forgotten about the need for those bathrooms, which is really great need. So, so that's part of this process, this next step. This storage component is sort of a standalone little piece of that was easily, bid out as a separate component. It would have been regardless of the timing, but yeah. So we're anxious to move forward with this and continue that process with the other, the next bid to hopefully finalize the project. The construction climate is an interesting one right now, so we'll.
And I also want to remind, I can hear the questions at town meeting, why does a storage building cost so much? As a, state or local government organization, we have certain rules that we have to follow that make construction of buildings for us different than the storage shed that you put up in your backyard. And so that's why it's going to cost more, because we have to follow those rules. Other questions, comments?
One
Mr.
last
Nunes?
question. I wrote it down and forgot to ask. Do we have a start date on this, Mr. Kiley?
Well,
Is it
so
gonna be after the fall season?
lead time, right, after the fall season, and lead time on steel is a major factor in this. So our hope is, to be starting the groundwork to lay the foundation for this fairly soon. We probably need about a month to finish all the submittals that are required to get this project actually to break ground. But at that point, we very well might be able to do the concrete work. It is set off the actual, stadium. It's a little ways from the field, and it could be fairly easily contained with construction fencing. So I don't anticipate that we'd have to wait to start construction. Now, materials in this climate are a problem, so we'll adjust accordingly.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm good, Madam Chair.
Other comments, questions? All right, go ahead. Someone going to say something?
No, I'm just saying thank you.
Yeah, it's great to be moving forward on this. All right, so hearing no further questions or discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So that motion carries unanimously. Thank you again.
Thank you for your
Mr.
support.
Kiley.
So, Madam Chair?
Yes.
May I just add something in regards
Yes.
to the stadium? So outside of what we just approved, in conversations with Mr. Mickelson and Mr. Talabom and the Select Board, they just wanted me to remind everyone, and I think they'll be doing it as well in their meeting, that the fundraising committee that was established pre-pandemic, they're going to try to get that up. They're going to make some phone calls and try to get that up and running. And they're going to be looking to, corporations and other businesses in town, as well as any individuals, to maybe try to raise some money to help supplement the cost of, whether it's this phase or next phase, but supplement some of the cost of, the one phase, this bid or the next bid. But yeah, no, they're really excited about that. Even if it's a little bit, every little bit helps, and there'll be, some certain things we can look for naming rights and all that. But they did want me to mention that they're really going to try to work on getting that fundraising committee off the ground to to go along with the stadium. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Oliver. All right, so the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda for fundraising activities for the Dartmouth School Music Association. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so I have a motion by Mr. Nunes, a second by Ms. Waite. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I
Mr.
actually,
Oliver.
thank you, Madam Chair. Just really quickly, just learning about it and all that, I got to say that it's amazing to me what the Dartmouth band parents do to help with this committee, and just the piece of hearing about like what they do at Gillette and all the other pieces. So it's just amazing, and I got to give props to everyone that's part of the DSMA. So that's all I have.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add to that. I'd just like to point that out every time this comes up, how much funding we get from what is essentially private sources. This is not public taxpayer-generated revenue. It is revenue that is provided basically by volunteers who put in time for our schools. And I know that the Dartmouth Band is a big pride of our community, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge that they likely wouldn't be so successful without so much sort of what is essentially private fundraising. And it's great that they do it. Sometimes, though, I just wish they didn't have to. That we could fund them at the levels that they really need. But as we know, I'm a broken record on this. Funding is short. But I think I always like to highlight these things so that people are really aware of that. Any other comments? All right, so hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Madam Chair,
Abstentions?
I will abstain.
Okay, so that is approved with 4 in favor and 1 abstention from Mr. Nunes. All right, so the next item on our agenda, moving on to new business, is school committee policies. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gifford to walk us through some of these.
Thank you. So the policy subcommittee met, I guess it was September 8th, if I recall correctly. And we reviewed these policies. And as we said, the sexual harassment one can be a little confusing, but really it's not. So I'll walk you through that. So on the advice of one of our attorneys, Kat Lyons, her office, they created these policies for us based on some of the changes that have taken place over time with the harassment and sexual harassment legal issues. So what we're proposing is to add ACA, which is a small policy, non-discrimination on the basis of sex. And some of these you will see, they kind of intertwine. There's various language that overlaps, but they said these are the ones we should have in our policy booklet. So we're proposing to add ACA. That would be a brand-new policy. Then a little bit more confusing, I suppose, is we do have right now ACAB on the books, and that's called sexual harassment policy. Upon their advice, we are proposing to eliminate, or actually should say replace that with the one that you've received, the proposed, it's simply titled harassment. It would still be ACAB. And along that, we gave you what would then become the proposed processes to implement that policy. And this was all, as I said, on the advice of our attorneys, and the process, the due process protections, et cetera, and how folks would go about reporting harassment of any kind is all laid out there, and that would be in our posted so folks could see that in our handbooks, et cetera, et cetera. For this year, right now, and the teachers were alerted to this during our opening day. They received, Kat Lyons actually came down and did training on this for them, along with the 504 training. It's, the yearly training we do, but we did ask her to focus in on this to give folks an idea of how to report any kind of issues and what it really meant and the differences in the old policy and the new. And the administrative team, the leadership team for the district, received actually probably a 2-hour training with her this summer on this, so a very thorough training. So this year, Mr. Kiley would be one of our Title IX coordinators, along with Beth Townsend. We have kind of told folks that they could report to anyone, but Mr. Kiley would more handle the kind of an adult staff issues, and Ms. Townsend would handle more of anything, with students. So, as I said, we're just proposing to add ACA as a new policy, replacing our current ACAB with the proposed harassment policy, and we would separate into having these process or policy procedures that folks would be made aware of. So that's that one. Probably want to take them separately, I imagine.
Yeah, let's start with any questions, comments, or concerns about these two policies before we move on to the next ones. So this is a first reading tonight. You'll get any feedback, and then we'll come back for a second reading. Does anybody have any comments, Mr. Oliver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just in reviewing it when I looked over it earlier. The proposed ACAB harassment policy. I see employee to student, student to student, but does this policy also cover staff on staff, or is that something different?
It'd be the same, yep.
So it would be same, it's just not specifically
Yeah.
outlined
Right.
here, bolded out. But it does, this policy is all encompassing.
All encompassing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. That's all
You're
I have.
welcome. It's quite thorough.
Other comments, questions?
No.
I have a question about policy ACA, which is new, and that's the policy based on non-discrimination on the basis of sex. ACAB has a broader sort of list of categories covered. Do we have another existing policy that says we don't, right, because it says ACA was sex, but it's missing race, gender identity, creed, all
Right.
those other things that are listed there. So I just want to make sure that all of those things are covered
Yep.
elsewhere.
We do. I'm not sure if we forwarded it to you, but I have it here. We also have AC already. We're not changing that, but that
Okay.
is addressing exactly what you're saying. That's our non-discrimination policy.
Okay. So I'm a bit confused if we have AC, why we need ACA if sex is covered already in AC. It just seems weird to me that we would separate out that one and not any of the others. So I'm sure there's a reason, I'm just trying to
Right, right.
understand.
And I think probably just because of, as time went on and more cases came up in those kinds of, with that kind of issue, that the legal people decided that was a good thing to kind of add that as a separate one, so, to really make emphasis on
I was
it.
just going to say, probably make an emphasis and just
Yeah.
pushing it out there to bring it more to the
Yeah, it's just my
forefront.
understanding that Title IX covers more than sex. It
Yeah.
covers sexual orientation and
Right.
gender identities.
Covers
It
a number of
seems-
things.
And that is in
seems-
this
Number of
one,
things.
the
Right, it
AC.
just seems odd to
ACA.
I
separate
know,
it out
the
on its
one.
own.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
And with specific reference to Title IX, which also
Yep.
covers non-discrimination in
Right.
other areas. I'm probably going to read this a little bit more
Yep.
carefully again. It's a really complicated issue. There's been a number, particularly when the harassment occurs particularly between students,
Yeah, read
but,
that, yeah.
but it's not on school grounds. And that's the really complicated issue in today's day of social Snapchat and Instagram.
Mm-hmm. goodness, yeah.
I'm an old person. I just use Facebook, so I don't even know what the kids use these days. But I'm sure the lawyer knows more about this, but I think I just wanted to take some time to read it carefully.
Sure.
So if I have any questions, I will email those to you.
Yeah, that would be good, because I could get answers from her specifically, because obviously she's the expert and I'm
Right.
not.
Right, exactly. Other questions or comments? All right, so I think we're good on the first reading on those two. We want to move on to, I guess, FF now?
Okay. So FF, as you recall, last year, we had a request from a community member, also coach, to name one of our areas of our schools after someone. And we decided we would need to revisit our policies before we did that, if we were inclined to do that. So our old policy really was about, and not to say that this committee at some point in time, and I know Mr. Nunes forwarded some information to us, have addressed some of these things before, but we never had it kind of in a policy as this, where it's subsections of a building. So our old policy, as you can see, FF was just naming a new facility. So we've enhanced that and are proposing, the new one was naming facilities or subsections of facilities. So again, you could name it a library or a gymnasium, et cetera. So that's all. That's what we would propose, that it would include that, and how the committee would go about, we would probably do a subcommittee again, like in the past, I know that has been done, when it named some of the schools, et cetera. So that's what we're proposing for that one. And again, any questions, or I know folks will have a chance to read it.
Mr. Nunes?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I went back and dug out some old information that I had on this and forwarded it to Dr. Gifford. One of the questions I have is I'm kind of, and maybe this is going to come up later on as this comes up, is one of the things was like, what was the wow factor
Right.
type of deal? And I'm not seeing that here or
Well,
anything of that, or is this just to get it going and then
yeah.
develop the policies after?
Yeah, and so what we would do, exactly, so if it, it says that we have the authority to do that, but that we would then, similar to the past, you'd have a committee or whatever, and you would
Right.
have those procedures identified that someone would have to submit. And like you said, I looked through the wording and stuff that you gave us, and
Yeah.
they submit the why.
Yeah.
And actually, if I recall, looking at the documents we have, it actually kind of almost detailed certain questions that the committee was asking for these people
Yeah.
to identify why, that they
Again, I go
were
back,
submitting that
and I
person.
remember when we,
Yep, exactly. So we
did
would
this way back, so.
probably, and you would authorize us to create the committee and entertain the requests and go forward.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Questions,
No,
comments?
I'm good other than that right at the moment.
I guess I just have one question about this, and if I'm reading this right, the old policy says, whenever possible, the wishes of the community, including parents and students, should be considered in naming new facilities. I don't see that in the new facility, and while I don't think that public input has to be the be-all, end-all, I do think some engagement, when possible, as the old policy said, is good and useful. So I'm wondering if there is a reason why we dropped that, or whether we want to maybe add that back. Mr. Nunes, you have some thoughts on that?
I do, and I think I go right back to what the question I just asked the superintendent about the wow factor and her comment about if we as a committee deem something viable, then forming a subcommittee and getting the letters, and that's going to generate the community involvement and things of that nature, unless I'm misreading something.
Right, but I guess I would rather, it was in the policy and it's been dropped. I'd rather just see it stay in there so it's known. I trust all of you, right, but we want to create policies that survive beyond the people sitting in the seats and that institutionalize things. So I'd like to see some sentence like that remain in the policy. And how the wishes of the community are taken is, up to the committee, but I think it's important to say to the subcommittee and the committee, we should be listening to the public.
Yeah.
Mr. Oliver?
I would agree with that. I don't see any issue with that. I know Mr. News is shaking his head, but I can certainly see both sides, but I do agree that, it should be some kind of language in the policy. I guess my other question is, are we able to look at like what the MASC model language is to policy? Do they have model language for this through MASC? I was just curious.
This is all I found.
Okay.
I could be wrong. I
Okay.
mean, certainly, if someone has something for sure, but the old one was all I saw, to tell you the truth. But yeah, I would agree with adding some kind of language like that. Because that's really what happens when we go forward with the process, so you can put it in writing for sure.
Right. Any other comments or questions? All right, so that one will come back to us
Yep.
too, and then we're on to KF, community use of facilities.
And Ms. Kylie will be reviewing that one.
Thank you, Dr. Gifford. So KF itself is the sort of broad community use of school facilities policy. That policy is actually not up for revision. KFR which is, really KF was presented to you for context, just so you understand what we are trying to address in KFR. So KFR addresses the terms and fees associated with use of facilities requests. So the primary changes to KFR, most of them are just sort of housekeeping changes in who does what, and some changes in process, where to look for things, who to get things from, for people who are prospective users of the facilities. But I think, there was a couple of important changes that we did make to KFR. One, we highlighted the fact that users need to familiarize themselves and follow Dartmouth Public Schools policy and procedures. We also added in some safeguards and added in regarding the use of the stadium. Obviously, this policy long predates, use the turf field at the stadium. We really think it's important that we have someone on site to assist users of the field throughout their rental or period of use. So that was not addressed in the previous policy, and we have received numerous requests and some comments from other elected board members throughout the town regarding use of the facilities by recreation groups. We have had use since the turf field opened by some recreation groups of the facility. Time on the field is somewhat limited because we have, fortunately, a very robust program between athletics and music, use of the field, but we are sensitive to the fact that community use of it is important, and we hope to be able to to expand that as much as possible after our own school activities are scheduled. So in thinking about that, again, when we're using it, we have someone on site who is responsible for the facility. And we need to make sure that that's happening whenever someone is using it. So that was really the primary reason for making the changes that we did, kind of subtle changes to the policy.
I just want to say, I appreciate, it's super helpful to me personally to see a markup version of policies.
Agreed.
It's really useful to be able to see what's being added and what isn't. If we can continue to do that, that would be fabulous, just because sometimes it's hard to know what's changed where. This is all marked up, and so it makes it really easy to see, so I appreciate that.
Especially with the money.
Right,
prices.
yeah, exactly. Are there any comments, questions? Mr. Nunes?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and, been around when you look at this and you go, yeah, I remember when this was put in, or that type of deal, but, and somewhere down the line, I don't know why I didn't bring it up way back when, but, I already had this discussion with Mr. Kiley. Wherever we see, like, the Assistant Superintendent of Finance or Operation, can we put or designee? I mean, if, if Mr. Kiley's not there, somebody can, somebody could come in, and give authorization type of deal. But other than
I'm
that,
just thinking along those lines too, right? I mean, Mr. Kiley, if that's a title that he has, and maybe if someone replaced him, we might even want to make it like generic, so that, because we have this problem with our contract, right? It references positions that haven't been on campus for 20 years, right? And nobody has gone through and line item edited to take out those dated references.
yeah,
So we might want to just think about making it whatever we insert where you say that, right? Generic enough so that we don't have to change the policy when personnel change.
yeah, again,
How about something like Office of Finance and Operations? So whatever the title of the person becomes,
yeah.
Right,
still
right.
being
A
that
designee from
From,
the,
yeah,
office.
yeah, exactly.
Maybe
Yeah.
that would work.
Shannon?
I don't know.
Or
Go ahead.
Or,
Go ahead.
you could put superintendent or designee, I mean, you're always going to have a superintendent, so you could put that. I mean, it just doesn't, it's not as specific
Yeah.
as for someone who's looking at the policy, who they should
Right,
call.
right.
But yeah.
I don't feel strongly about it. I'm just more sort of spitballing about it.
Yeah.
Mr. Nunes, do you have other comments?
Nope,
Sorry.
I'm good, Madam Chair.
Okay, other comments,
you.
questions, concerns? I guess my one question would be about sort of the rates, right? How do we set these? When did we set these? I mean, we aren't proposing many changes to them. Presumably, they were set at some time based on something, and presumably, our costs have gone up since that time. So I'm just sort of curious about, I don't want to charge people more money, but I do want to make sure, that we are covering sort of the cost of doing business.
Yeah, and I think if we, in that regard, if we look at KF, which describes who's going to be using the facility, the school activities aren't going to be paying any fees, obviously. The town meeting and other town board activities aren't going to be paying any fees. The Parks Department, at this point, the Parks Department sanctioned leagues, they do not pay a fee. They pay for custodial coverage or, obviously maintenance coverage if we're talking about the stadium. But they actually don't pay a fee. So really, there's not very many people who are paying fees for use of our facilities because there's not, after we exhaust all the time that those groups, take up the spaces, there's not much more time to be had. Generally speaking, we have some dance recitals and things like that. I've taken a look at the fees based on that. I think, the surrounding communities that I've taken a quick look at, we're not really far off, even though that these have been in place now for, I think the last time we looked at them was 2013.
Okay.
So, yeah, they're a reasonable fee if we do have enough time to offer
Okay, great.
them.
Madam Chair?
Thank you. Mr. Nunes?
Thank you. I do have one, as I was just flipping through, I came across one, I forgot to notate it, my fault. 4.3, which is just before the fee schedules, talks about food and beverage sales in the stadium are permitted, that type of deal. Somewhere, can we put in there that these organizations have to have a certificate from the Board of Health?
Okay.
Or, some license, a license type of deal?
Mm-hmm.
And, somebody that's serve safe?
We can do so.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments or
Thank you.
questions? All right, so I think we're done with the school committee policies, and you'll bring those back to us for a second reading. And the next item on our agenda ties in a little bit with what we've been talking about, and that's the use of school space by outside groups. Ms. Amaral asked me about this, and I actually sort of wanted to bring this up with you all. There was a window, I think late last spring, when we all thought it would be a nice sort of normal school year. We wouldn't have any of this. And I know the DEF put in to host an in-person event in the schools in November. There have been some other organizations that are approved. And I wanted us to have a conversation about that, about whether or not we are comfortable with large outside groups hosting events in our schools right now. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not even sure myself. I'm just concerned, right? Our policy is you wear masks, right, when you're in school buildings. Mr. Kiley, you said, when we have our events, we have people that we are, making sure that those policies are followed. I'm just not sure how that's going to work for outside groups, and so I'm just a little bit concerned about that. I don't know if Dr. Gifford or Mr. Kiley, you have any thoughts on this, or anyone else on the committee has any thoughts about this? Go ahead, Mr. Kiley.
I do, and, after you brought it up, Dr. Jenkins, giving it some thought, and you had shared some points with us, I think that given that there is, at this point, not a gathering restriction in the Commonwealth, I think there's a few things that we can do and still not be contrary to the current guidance. So I think if we include in our approval letters for use of facilities requests that organizations are subject to the change to the current guidelines and any changes that may be put in place by the Mass Department of Public Health or the Governor's Office, and that we always have the right to cancel. We always include that anyway, but that, we have the right to cancel or alter their approval based on, conditions, based on any conditions, and that there's a mask advisory in place, and that we would encourage folks to self-monitor for COVID-like symptoms and encourage their guests to self-monitor, basically mirror the language that's in place in the Commonwealth at this point. The mask mandate is for students and staff in school. That's what the...
But let me just push back on that, because some of the events, like the spelling bee, are held on a weeknight when there are, in fact, students and staff in the building, right? And I just don't feel comfortable. I mean, in my book, if you're in the school and there are students and staff in this building, you got to wear a mask, right? There's no exception to that, right? And so if that's the case, how do we ensure that these groups are masking, right? We are different than other places in the Commonwealth, and that we're a school and there is a mask mandate. And so I would feel, if we're going to allow, and I'm not sure, I believe that people should be required to be masked at these events. I don't know what my fellow school committee members think, but there are times when we're having events and there are children and staff, and our custodial staff are here, right? I mean, they're here, right, on those times. Mr. Oliver?
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Excuse me. My personal opinion on this is that I do think that we should be allowing outside groups to participate in using the buildings. However, I am strongly in agreement that any outside group should be masked. Obviously, athletic groups, the players, I'm not sure where, right now what the guidance is on athletics and players. However, in general, I think any group, outside group using the schools, any of the schools need to be masked inside the building. Once again, though, we go back to the question of enforcement of that, and I don't have a simple answer to that.
I mean, I think maybe we could have the organizers sign sort of like a COVID agreement that acknowledges that they are in fact responsible for it. Given how social media is in the community, I'm sure we'll see and hear about it, right? If things go wrong, and I think, that may affect future ability to use the facilities if people aren't following the guidelines. Ms. Waite?
I was just going to say that, as, my husband's a coach for DYSA, is they had in the spring a COVID coordinator that every team had to have, and that person was responsible for, coordinating with the team, keeping everyone accountable, following COVID guidelines. So I think it's reasonable for us to hold, groups that are coming in and say that they should have a COVID coordinator as well, someone that, is responsive to us, or to, Mr. Kiley, and setting up the protocols and the expectations for their group and holding that group accountable. So I think that's a pretty, moderate way of accomplishing our goals. Because I also think that we should, we're trying to make life as normal as possible. Bring the kids in. I'd love to see, DYA playing basketball and all of that back again. I think it's exciting, and, but again, we have to protect our staff and our students and our larger goal of keeping kids in school. So that still remains our priority.
Ms. Amaral?
Yeah, I would agree with my colleagues here. Just thinking about what you're saying, Dr. Jenkins, that I think about events that I've held, like with the CPAC over the years. And while our event is happening, we'll often have students coming in playing a basketball game, or the theater students in the other room. Music students are always here, working really hard at their craft. And so I would think it'd be reasonable to ask that folks coming in, if that is decided upon, to have someone responsible to us for that. you know, and honestly, though, I think about, you know, I would like to see us, you know, open house was canceled, and I don't know the reason. We can talk about that after, but I hate to see us not having, you know, the things that we have in a district. We don't have folks coming into our school committee meetings. We don't have, we had to cancel open house potentially for a different reason, but then allowing the community to just use it and numbers coming up and not monitoring how many people are coming in and whether or not they're really, you know, abiding by those kind of precautions worries me, and also concerns me, because I think, you know, students and families should come first.
Mr. Nunes, did you
Yeah,
have
thank you, Madam
comments?
Chair. There's a bunch of things that come into play here, type of deal. Yes, we want to see our buildings used. I mean, they're for the community. And one of the things, you know, years ago we talked about was, you know, these are community buildings and we want to see them used for the community. The thing that concerns me, and I totally get the mask wearing, no issues with that type of deal, but how do you enforce it? Okay, I mean, you have 50 people here for XYZ activity, and 2 people come in without a mask. Now, who's the person that says, you know, hey, put a mask on? No. You gotta, no, I'm not leaving. You know, that type, now you get into a whole hullabaloo type of deal. So that there's, I think, a lot more here than what meets the eye with what, you know, we've got to come up with. I mean, you know, I think we need to get these buildings back operational type of deal, but we've got to do it sensibly, we've got to do it fair. And in all seriousness, we've got to have, the onus has to be on the people coming into the building, okay? It's as simple as that. I mean, you know, again, we've talked about it till we're blue in the face with COVID and everything else. If, you know, if you don't feel good, stay home type of deal. But we've got to just be able to control things and use it in that sense. And you know, I think if we're going to do it, then we're going to have to put that onus on whoever signs the paperwork to use the building, and that's how it's got to be. I mean, because other than that, you know, are you leaving it, again, going back, are you leaving it on the person that signs the paperwork, or there are going to be custodian or custodians here? Do you put it on a custodian? You know, that type of deal.
This
So
is
there's a-
100% my dilemma here, Mr. Nunes. I agree with you that, right?
You know?
On the one hand, I don't want to say don't come in without a mask, but if we say who comes in with a mask, who enforces it? But I don't think, I'm not comfortable saying no mask because there are students here.
Yeah.
There are staff here. So I don't want to say, oh, you know, just we'll follow the Commonwealth guidelines, because all the students were saying you got to wear your mask. They have to wear their mask regardless, right? After school, weekends, if they're here, they're wearing a mask, yes?
Yeah.
So now we have situations where there's a group of people who have to be masked, and there's a group of people who don't have to be masked.
Dr. Jenkins, I can give you a perfect example. When I came in tonight, the drum line was coming up from practicing, okay? They stopped where they always stop, and they started to come in, and the section leader said, don't forget to put your masks on.
Right.
So, I mean, the kids, the students are well-versed in that type of deal, but,
But I think we've got to tell outside groups that
Yeah.
if you want to use our facilities, you have to mask up.
yeah.
There may be problems with enforcement, you are right, but I think that, like, it's like any crime. We're not going to solve all of it, but we've still got to take a stand to say
Yeah.
what we need to do.
Yep.
Ms. Waite, and then Mr. Oliver?
And I would just say again, if they have a COVID coordinator or whatever the designee is, they're responsible, and if they violate the rules, they don't come back. I mean, it's, you know, it's a bummer, but I kind of want to, you know, echo what Mrs. Amaral is saying, is that, you know, we do want to prioritize using our buildings for ourselves, and I think, you know, Mr. Nunes was saying this as well, that, you know, if we are considering, and this does kind of bring into question, if we're allowing outside groups, what does that mean about what we're holding ourselves here? In other words, why are we canceling these events? Why are we not going on field trips if we're allowing other groups to come in? I think it does, you know, bring up a whole other layer of issues and questions, because everything should be centered first and foremost on our students. and their experiences and their quality experiences and on our families, as Mrs. Amaral was saying. So, you know, thinking through that, if we're not allowing our students to go out into the community, are we allowing inside groups, in field trips and those things? And we're allowing, I think we have a little bit of an issue there, and we have to think about it. I'll get back to what Mr. Nunes was saying, is that it does deepen our questions and concerns. It's not a simple issue.
Mr. Oliver, you had a comment?
Yeah, a couple of things now. Now you got me thinking a little more, Mrs. Wade and Mr. Nunes. Thank you for that. But no, I agree. I think, we just, I don't know if we're already, those groups that are already coming into the buildings, if they've already been, some kind of notice to them. But I think it's as simple right now that we give them notice that this is the expectation using the building. Everyone needs to be masked. I think whether it's a COVID coordinator, event organizer, whoever it may be, that the onus is on them, and I have no doubt that we will hear about it. But as far as putting that responsibility, I can't see putting that responsibility on a building custodian or someone else. So it's really going to come back to them, in which it's going to hurt them in the future if they choose to not enforce and help us enforce and help the administration and the school community enforce the policy that's been set in place. But yet, and then going back to what my colleagues have spoken about, it certainly brings up some interesting points in which, ways and the optics of that to see how we can do more for our own students and some kind of normalcy if we're going to be if we continue to allow outside groups in. But no, it's certainly an interesting discussion. Thank you.
So it seems to me, it seems to be the consensus of the committee that we do want to allow outside groups to continue to use the facilities, that we'd like to have maybe some form or acknowledgement saying that under, current DESE guidelines or whatever, mask wearing is mandated. Maybe there's a name that they have to sign and contact information about who's responsible, and acknowledging that on the behalf of the organization. So again, it may not be perfect, and we're not going to ask our custodians to, but the organization is aware and know that they have to try to do this. And then also we might acknowledge in that form that non-compliance may have a negative effect on future use of facilities. That seems to be where we're at. And then I think there's a separate sort of bucket of issues that probably not tonight because it's not on the agenda, and I don't like to discuss things when they're not on the agenda. But, things that are school related about sort of going out and things like field trips and stuff like that we might continue that discussion at a future meeting. Does that seem about right? Yeah. Okay, so I'm sure Ms. Genthner got that, and hopefully can relay that to Mr. Kiley. And I would it would be great if we could, reach out to groups that already have, like the DEF. I'm not even sure we're going to do the spelling bee, to be honest, but groups like us that last spring signed an agreement to say, okay, this has been updated, and just so you know, this is what you have to do. That would be great. All right, so moving on, the next item on our agenda, Ms. Waite and Ms. Amaral asked me to add to the agenda a discussion regarding nut products in school buildings. Would one of you like to, maybe Ms. Waite, since you brought it up first, would you like to go ahead and sort of explain here?
Sure. So I know last year in a conversation considering COVID and everything was going on, and students were eating primarily across all schools in their classroom. In a conversation with Dr. Gifford, we as a district went nut-free. I had parents who had asked me, as of the week before school started, are we continuing to be nut-free? I had asked some administrators too, and up to the few days before school started, I was under the assumption, and it seemed that some administrators had told some other parents as well, that we were going to continue to be a nut-free system. It was only, really the Friday before school started that I learned that change had happened. I don't know that parents were aware, and certainly parents of allergic children were aware of that change. I didn't see any, I'm in that situation myself. I didn't have any, heads up or any literature come home to say that there was an official change. And I guess I would say, I know that if I've looked at the language, I've looked at, FAIR and certainly quite a number of other advisory councils on this, and I understand that there's kind of a changing thought on nut-free schools. I think they call it the good and the bad and the ugly, and that, we want to have schools where students feel safe and, and able to participate fully in activities. We don't want to create stigma for those children, and so there is some thought on that, but you have the complications of COVID, and with students, in safer schools, students would be eating in the cafeteria, they would have designated tables. In the middle school, certainly that's not something we can do right now. Students are eating in their classroom seats. It's my understanding that the students themselves are wiping down those seats, but that they're then moving from one desk to another throughout the day. Wipes or, what am I looking for?
Like Clorox wipes.
Hand sanitizer doesn't deal with any kind of, one of the issues, hand sanitizer doesn't deal with any food particles, so they have to wash with soap and water. I don't get the impression that every student in every middle school classroom is going and washing their hands with soap and water after. So I feel like the fact that we're dealing with masking, and my concern is dealing with masking and also students eating in their seats and rotating to different seats, creates a continuous dangerous atmosphere for these kids. And also masks, it's difficult for the younger students to see what's happening behind those masks in terms of hives and other early warning signs of allergic reactions. And so that's another concern. So I would just say, I would hope that while we're continuing with masking and we're continuing to eat in our classrooms, just to keep these children safe, that we would continue to stay nut-free. And then once, we remove masks and return to a more traditional setting with eating in the cafeteria, we can reevaluate. That would be my hope. So it's rather long.
Emerald, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I brought it up. I think I forwarded you one email that I received, but I had not known, and very fortunate that my family is not affected by any, nut allergies. However, I just hearing a little bit of buzz on social media and getting some Facebook, messages and emails into my account. I thought, I didn't really know the answer, because I did think that, I guess similarly, that we were still nut free. Having said that, when school did start, my daughter came home, and I guess there was some attention to it that I wasn't aware of after I had emailed that, but it's still a little bit of a concern. And so I didn't say don't put it on the agenda. I think it's a good conversation to have and an important topic to talk about. That my daughter came home and said, because nobody in my block has an allergy, we can bring in nuts. And I thought, or have nut products. We're like a Sun Butter family, but anyway, my son's school is nut free. But I just thought that, that sounded good, but then they are intermingling. They're not, the blocks are intermingling in gym and in other places. So at any rate, I just thought it would be good to just revisit it officially at a meeting, and not knowing that Ms. Waite had also brought it up, but I know she's personally affected by this.
So Dr. Kipper, can you talk to us a little bit about what the policies are and where kids are eating and I think this is the big concern, right? When they were in cafeterias, the nuts were contained there. There was
Correct.
Usually a table or whatnot, right? And so that way kids could know that they weren't in other places. But because we can't keep all of the kids in cafeterias because of the distancing, that makes it harder, particularly to clean right now. So can you talk about what our protocols are for cleaning and where the buildings are that kids are not eating in the, is it just the middle school or is it also here in the high school?
Well, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I did reach out to all of the administrators and got an answer to it. And they just resorted pretty much back to our traditional practices, which we've been using forever, other than last year. The high school has signage in the area of the dining hall. This is what I was told. As well as the auditorium, that's nut-free, so they have specific areas. And the monitors and administrators, obviously there's a lot of administrators around to know where those areas are and obviously then educate the kids as well. Of course, high school is a little bit different, and they're pretty
Yeah.
much responsible for themselves. At DeMello, same thing, kids are at their desk in the cafeteria, and there's a red dot on the desk of any students who have allergies. So they can do a deep clean between lunch shifts of those desks. That's DeMello. And there are, Katie says there are certain rags that are only used for those desks, so they separate those. Middle school students, while eating in their classrooms, are situated, as we always say, approximately 3 feet apart. And teachers have been always, as usual, made aware of the students in their class that have the allergies. That's always one of the things the nurses work with. And as you said, they have the wipes, et cetera, to make sure the areas are cleaned. And he says, well, they're creating a column, and this was last week, so we had just started school, on the menu ordering Google document, which enables teachers and CAF to effectively, staff, monitor the lunch orders relating to food allergies. And of course, if a parent asked, I'm not sure they have, they would make even another accommodation for those parents of safer seating. Cushman has done it a little bit different, that they have set out that they would look that when they're giving a snack, they don't have the nut products, and if the children are bringing nut products for lunch, the teachers are made aware, and they're in the cafeteria, but they're separated out. Potter, same thing, resorting back to the previous practices. The nurse actually calls each family to work out any individual plans they may have. The general practice, of course, is that the families of students in the class, they're all made aware, and it's classes that have, just like we used to, nut-free desk areas, or a nut-free classroom completely. In the cafeteria, there's an allergy-aware table for students who sit there because of their allergies. Other students are allowed to sit at the table, but they must be eating a lunch that obviously didn't have the nuts in it. And same thing pretty much at Quinn. They have an assigned desk for nut-free students, and each of the desks are cleaned separately from the rest. And classrooms that have students with nut allergies are peanut-free, or nut-free, the whole classroom. So that's what the administration forwarded to me, just to be certain that everybody was back on the same track.
Can I follow up on the middle school?
Yep.
So, Ms. Amaral noted that in her daughter's block,
Yep.
are they nut-free, or are blocks with kids who have allergies? This is my first question. Are they nut-free or no?
I was not told whether a whole block was nut-free. I would
Right,
imagine
so that is
classroom is
concerning
nut-free.
to me, that particularly if we've got 3 feet of distance, and say I'm nut-free and Mary's sitting next to me with her peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? That can be a problem.
I think the other, if I can just interject, and I will say, like, my son's going through desensitization, so I'm, but I'm aware, having gone through this, that I certainly empathize with these families. It isn't even just so much that, because if you're in the cafeteria, you have a adult who's going to be cleaning that table.
I didn't get to the cleaning part
Sorry,
yet,
so
right?
this is really
Yeah.
the concern, is that if I'm sitting next to Dr. Jenkins, and then we all of a sudden switch the next block for math, or another class comes in, and I unknowingly sit in Dr. Jenkins' seat, which has been, cleaned by a fellow sixth grader, it's concerning if she just ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then another child comes back and sits in that same seat. Because they are moving, it's my understanding that now without social distancing, and this is the difference, I actually thought last year was safer because they were sitting in their same seats. They weren't moving from room to room. Now they're going to be sitting in each other's seats. So it's not just during the lunch period itself. It's the fact that they're switching seats. They're going and sharpening pencils. And, if this protocol is going to consider, those kids are going to, after lunch, not only have to sanitize their desk, but because we don't want these kids to, we don't want these kids to go in anaphylactic shock. So those kids, every student in that block where peanut butter and jelly, if they've eaten peanut butter and jelly, they're going to have to go and wash their hands with soap and water too. So there's multiple, the cleaning issue, again, it's just much harder to control if you're eating peanut butter in the classroom, or peanut products, or nut product, or any, of these major allergens, and then you're moving from seat to seat and asking the kids to clean the seats themselves.
Who does the cleaning? The kid who's eating the peanut butter and jelly?
I haven't been in the class when I watch kids
This is my
clean,
other
so
concern,
I don't know.
right? Because,
Do you?
you know,
No, I
my
don't
son's
know.
best friend is allergic to peanut butter. And if you ask him to clean the table, that table is going to be clean. If you ask my son to clean the table, I'm not entirely confident that that table is going to be clean, right? A sixth grade boy is not, no offense to sixth grade boys, but I've
We've
raised
all
a
had
couple of them. They do not have attention to detail that's necessary in a life-threatening situation. So, you know, at first I didn't realize that they were eating at their desks.
Middle
Or
school,
if they
yeah.
were eating at the cafeteria, I think we have those protocols, we've had them for
Yes.
many years.
Right.
And I think that's fine, but we're not entirely normal right now. And so I do think, at least in my personal opinion, we can maybe hear from Mr. Oliver, Mr. Nunes too, that I think particularly at the middle school, we really need to evaluate this. Because I don't know, the risks are high, and, you know, I'm just not sure the losses are that much if we clamp down on this a little bit. I don't know, Mr. Oliver, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I can add a few things. So what I'm hearing here is that really the concerns and the issues are around the middle school for the simple reason that they're eating at their desks in their classrooms. As, you know, someone who is very familiar with someone who has a tree nut allergy, not a peanut allergy, but a tree nut allergy, that, you know, just the dust alone can cause anaphylaxis. That it is concerning, and I would certainly be in favor of, you know, not allowing nut products at the middle school, you know, right in the classrooms, because you certainly bring up some good points. I'm not going to belabor or anything, but the points that you made, Mrs. Waite and Mrs. Amaral, are certainly justified, in my opinion, and, you know, I would certainly support staying nut-free until a time at which we're back in the cafeterias.
Mr. Nunes, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I hear what everybody is saying. My concern becomes, how far down do we take this? Okay? What do you do about if someone's got a gluten problem? If somebody's got bread that's not gluten-free, are they going to have a problem? You have
Generally doesn't
someone-
cause anaphylactic
But,
shock.
no, let me finish, please. Okay, so that's fine, but, you know, there are situations where people have allergies to other foods, you know, celery, carrots, strawberries. How far down the line do we have to draw this? That's my only concern. I think the easiest way to do this, my opinion, is just go back and just say to the parents, please, until we get back into cafeterias, make everything nut-free. Okay, I mean, I wasn't going that way, but I got a hunch that's going to be the easiest way to solve this problem.
I think we're all in agreement. I think that it's an unusual time right now and unusual circumstances. I would agree with you 100%, Mr. Nunes.
So,
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, so can you will follow up with the middle school about this?
Middle school?
Well, I think the middle school is where people are rotating desks and not eating in the cafeteria, right? In an elementary school, you're not rotating desks. I don't know, Mr. Nunes, you want to just do the whole 9 yards?
now you're gonna
No.
you know, pick on, no, you're gonna pick on the middle school students.
Well, I mean,
No, again,
it's the oldest building, that's why we're
I-
stuck with that, right?
yeah. That it is. I mean, I think if you're gonna do something of this nature, so as to not, you know, segregate or quote-unquote pick on one group type of deal, you do it system-wide.
Other thoughts?
And, you know,
That's my opinion.
I'll just say, like, you know, I also think it's fair that we also say that, you know, once we're back to normal, we reevaluate. Because, you know, again, there's been a change in thinking, you know, certainly about this, you know, and so I think we want to address that as well, once we get back to normal and we're not wearing masks and we're not eating in the classroom. So I do want to be, you know, fair on that as well.
Mr. Oliver?
I don't know. It goes back to if it's just the middle school, if the middle school is the concern with the rotating, I can certainly appreciate and understand it would be easier to just go right across the board. Either way, I'm okay with it, honestly, either way. It's just a matter of protecting the students at the end of the day, that we're protecting the students.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'm sorry. At the end of the day, it just comes down to protecting the students. Whether, I'm okay with it either way, whether we just do the middle school or if we want to do a blanket right across the district. It's the committee's pleasure. I will go along with the committee. However, to me, we need to just protect the students, period.
So how about this as a compromise? I think it's clear that we're all in agreement that at the very least, we'd like to look at this at the middle school. I trust in the judgment of our superintendent and our administrators about other buildings and whether those are safe. So it doesn't ultimately have to be up to us. I think I would like to, we could say, if you think it's easier to do the whole school and you don't have to say, the whole district, you don't have to say this tonight, right? If your team thinks it's easier to have a consistent policy across the district, that's fine with me. If your other schools, they're eating in the cafeteria, they're not switching desks, feel they're confident about that, that's also okay with me. Would that be acceptable to you all?
That's fine.
I'm fine with that.
So
Fine with that.
we'll leave it to the administration sort of discretion, but we do at the very least want that addressed at the middle school. Okay, so next on our agenda is our superintendent's update.
Alrighty, let's see, what shall I do in order here? I know what a couple of really big things we want to talk about, but I'm just seeing if there's a couple little things along the way. All right, so I know a couple of folks asked about where we are kind of with positive cases and close contacting right now. So as of today, what I see on the drive, and I'm only going since school started, 9/1, because of course we had reports previous to that, but the kids weren't in school, so we had 42 cases of positive across the district, since that was staff and students. And as of today, we have 89 students across the district in some kind of, as a close contact, whether they're coming back this week or Monday, et cetera. So 89 that I was given today. We have put in place some protocols for supporting students that have to quarantine, and we'll continue to try to enhance that. One of the things we did at the elementary level is, and we've actually already got 3 folks on board to do that, is we're providing some stipends for what we're calling student support liaison, and these are just grade level teachers that are, obviously, first of all, back up, we've asked all teachers to maintain their Google Classroom throughout the district. So that would be continuing to put up resources, lesson plans, assignments, et cetera, with the students are all knowledgeable on how to access, of course. And with that said, these student support liaisons would be working collaboratively with we did 2 for each school, and we always say DeMello and Cushman go together because it's the K students in there. A literacy and math who will be collaborating with the grade level teachers to enhance any kind of lessons, or if it's on the fly kind of thing, to keep working at maintaining that Google Classroom, but also to offer a before school check-in meeting with those students, as well as giving them direction for the day, how to access, what they should be doing, setting them off on their way, and then also a check-in or an hour after school, as it could be a tutorial. They could say, I didn't know how to do that math problem, or whatever it might be. And obviously, we're hoping that these are few, small groups across the grade levels that are having to do this. So that's kind of the elementary, what we've got in place right now. We also worked today on how the related services, Beth was going to put out email for them that just give them some direction, because if related services are normally already, that's their block anyway, so they can do a virtual speech or whatever it might be. Middle school is similar, where we have a couple of folks that are already in what they call like the acceleration. I can't remember if, no, they weren't here last time speaking about that. I'm thinking, I'm already ahead of myself that they're preparing the school improvement plans. But obviously, they're all maintaining the Google Classroom, and they're working with the secretaries as well, that every day they will remind them who's having to quarantine, so that the academic support time is available for those students. Darren asked that all of the teachers submit plans in writing on how they were going, like, similar to last year, they provided a schedule to kiddos. And the guidance is deeply involved. We do have the extra guidance person this year, so that's helpful to connect with students and families if they're just, gone and they don't pay attention, they don't come forward and meet with these things. But don't forget also, this is a usually shorter term quarantine that we have to do. So, and then we have the student support center person that we put someone in there. We were able to man that center with a person because of the ESSER money as well. So that's the added support for that person as well. Actually, when I talked to Sarah about it, they said they had a student already working really well with the teacher, maintaining grade. So hopefully it's a good start to help kids continue to access their learning. And the high school would be doing the similar work. I did speak with Renee last week, as well as Ross again today, about the use of the PACE period, but scheduling in. Remember, we have that PACE period that the students would be able to access and come in for extra help should they have to quarantine. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. Those plans are already going, and at least the Google Classroom. We want to make sure that students, when they are out, to continue to access that and make sure that they, stay involved. We are meeting again with DEA tomorrow to talk a little bit more about this and how teachers can continue to support kids. The test and stay, as I emailed you all about as well, it's been a bear to really get into it. I was at Superintendent's Executive Board meeting this weekend, and about 20 districts are in the same boat, so it's not us. The commission is well aware that CIC Health hasn't come through which we all said in the beginning when these promises were made, it was going to be a little bit more difficult than I think they thought. The CIC is aware of it as well and has promised that within the next 2 weeks they would be up and running. I've literally spent more hours than I can count working with this, trying to get this up and running, between webinar sessions, meeting with the nurses, meeting with Chris Michaud, emailing ad nauseum every email address and contact that they give to get support for, simply to get logins and passwords that don't then expire the next day. I'll have access to the system and then the next day not. We have had 3 program coordinators assigned to us. That's supposed to be our big helper. And finally, the third one met with us last week, and unfortunately, I think just got the job and really didn't know anything more than we did, if not less. So, but to her credit, she was trying, and she, it doesn't help us much. I did email her again today, all of the nurses' contacts, my contact, that we needed logins and passwords. There's 2 systems. One of them is the consent form system, which we had all the parents fill out. And then the other system is what they call the Crush the Curve. It's a software package which you maintain all your data in. So finally today, I did get another email, and I'm not sure if it was her or another pot, because I keep emailing everyone. And I was able to access both systems this afternoon. I've emailed the nurses, so they haven't emailed me back yet to see if they could as well. But I think even if I had it, I could just give my password out and they can use it. So with all that said, I was able to see everything. So I can see all the consent forms. I'm working my way through the software package itself. It was not very user-friendly and what do you do with it kind of thing. So, you test a little kiddo and then put the data in. So we'll get there. We have thought a little more thoroughly on the logistics of testing, depending on the number of students that you have to do. Laurie Jodwin and Chris Michaud and a couple other folks visited Voc today's, I don't know what day it is. Friday, thank you. To watch the process. Now, it's a very large school, as you know, 2020. They had 100 students they were testing. it took over 2 hours. So the people have to understand there's personnel involved in doing this. It's not only, and depends on how many students you have each day. So they show up at school or somewhere. We're thinking possibly a central location for some things because of the personnel needed. If you had a large number of students, you might have your nurses already manning the nurse station, which is very busy. Anybody that's been in a nurse's office, even in the morning, many students are coming in, might be diabetic students, et cetera, they need attention. So we kind of wanted to hope to keep our nurses in, let's just use the high school for example. The 2 nurses, could we use one in a station where kiddos were coming in and testing? We have to log them in. You have to, the test itself is the test itself, once you've administered it and prepared and administered it, is now a 15-minute wait to get the results. But you've also had to, prior to that, now think about even if it's 10 or 12 kids, one at a time, you drop your droplets in the little hole, they swab, that goes back in another hole, you swirl it around a few times, close it, and then you wait. So, you know, this student 15 minutes, now this one, so it backs up. So you need people, that's what I'm saying. You need people to help with the process. At Voc, they had 5 people. So we're working on that. We think we can use some of our own staff. Perhaps some might be paid extra overtime if they come in before their own school, like if it's an elementary, let's just say an elementary nurse happens to come to the middle and high school earlier to help with that. So there's been a lot of logistics and planning and frustration about it, but we have a couple of meetings planned for tomorrow, and we're going to really reach out and try to coordinate how we could start at least with the middle and high school, because the numbers are much lower, and the kids being older, thinking they could come in, do it, you know, and move along, and that we could probably access some elementary folks that would want to work a little bit extra and help out with that. So we're still positive that we're going to be able to get this up and running very shortly, now that I can access the system, and unless my password goes away again tomorrow. So that's kind of where we are with that. And like I said, we're hopeful.
Anybody have any
Still hopeful.
comments about any of that? Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Dr. Gifford, for your report.
You're welcome.
It's a mammoth undertaking, and of course, the state has not
Right.
delivered on what they promised. No surprise there. With that, though, is there any specific requirement, you say staff, as far as maybe using our own staff? Is there any specific training requirements? I'm familiar with the test that's being used.
Yeah.
I know that there was some school spring postings, I believe, for LPNs as well.
Yes,
Can
yes.
we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And are we, how did that come about? And obviously, I know how that
Yeah.
came about, but just to share with the committee as well
Sure.
as the viewing public.
Yeah, I'm glad you reminded me of that. So we have right now 10 nurses in the district. Obviously, anybody can be out at any time. We had 2. So that's why we're trying to expand that. One of them was the nurse that we hired last year with the grant money, and luckily with grant money, we were able to keep her on, so that added that additional staff. But we decided with this bear of a program that we're trying to not only assist our nurses in day-to-day, because it's very stressful, and they've really, really worked very hard on trying, and of course, just this added piece, they're unsure and they just want to do a good job. So we decided, again, with the ESSER money, that we would post for the TA LPNs, which we have a few in the district now. One works in our nurse's office here, and then a couple others, they assist medically fragile students in the schools. So we just posted that, hoping that these 2 folks, along with another one of our nurses that we use as kind of a floating nurse, would be able to fill in those gaps and really help us get the program running. But to your question also about training, there are some videos that's very easy training, but we have to attest to the fact that people that are doing natural testing have looked at those, which all of our nurses have. But it doesn't have to be a nurse per se, but the kiddos from K up can administer their own. So if a nurse prepared it or again, I'll say someone prepares it, they can swab themselves and we put it back in. So and then we're thinking, even to move it along quickly, again, depending on the numbers, we could just maintain a spreadsheet and then worry about inputting the data into the particular system later on through the use of somebody else. So, but just to kind of
Sure.
get this going. And then you have to think about protocols of where you're having it, because, you know, we think like the high school, we've just discussed it today, would be a good spot where like we did the clinics themselves. If anybody that went to them, they came in through that side door into the gymnasium. So if that was before school and other kids were coming here, that could work well too. So we're thinking of that. The elementaries are causing a little bit more of a problem because once again, there's many buildings. So the point of trying to have enough help at each one or using a central location. So we're tossing those ideas around, but we're hoping to get that solved maybe
Okay,
this
so
week.
a couple more questions.
Yep.
In regards to the software that generated the parent consent forms, did we have a large percentage? What was the percentage of parents wanting to participate in that?
I can't tell you the percentage. We do have a lot. There's a lot in there.
Okay.
I only can't tell you because I kind of just got into it today. It's
Sure.
but I do see a lot of names and,
Sure.
yeah, so that
Okay.
seemed to be successful.
And then the other question that I had was, based on, you know, because there was some I think there's been some confusion, and not just with the district, with the state,
Yeah.
with the protocols, with
Right.
the contact tracing, and, you know, as a parent, I still have more questions than answers.
Yeah.
Around just all the different requirements, like, and I won't
Sure.
I won't go down the political road.
Yeah.
But I certainly have more questions than answers. But just so everyone at home can understand the testing, and I know you've sent out some communication, but just so if we can just reiterate again, that the Test and Stay program is really about trying to keep those students who are close contacts in school
Right.
instead of having to go home and quarantine.
Right, right.
So that's really, and if I'm missing anything, but that's
No,
really the
you've got-
gist of the
that's-
program.
That's what we're
that-
trying,
And
yeah.
that's what we're trying to do.
Right.
And I know it's a monumental task, but I think anything we can do to keep our students
Right.
in school, instead of being at home in quarantine, because that's a whole other thing, and I know you're working
Yeah.
with the.
A lot of
the-
pieces.
Exactly, with the chair of the Dartmouth Educators Association as well.
Right.
Trying to come up with some agreements there for those students that may have to go home. There's so much to think about.
There is.
So, no, that's all I have. I've taken up enough
Yeah.
time. Thank you.
And we really do, as much as we have the rules and the protocols, we still depend on our nurses' judgment calls. Sometimes with students are symptomatic, there are major symptomatic pieces and there are minors, which would have to be in combination with others to automatically, even if we tested and the test was negative, they would go home because of what
The
those
symptoms.
particular, yeah, so we really depend on the nurses' judgment as well. And they're very well versed in all of this.
It's so important that
Yep.
that we have,
Yep.
the nursing staff that
Yep.
we do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Mr. Nunes?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious, when the superintendent is actually doing superintendent schoolwork.
Not for the last 2
Type
weeks.
of deal. I mean, I'm looking, I'm kind of going through this and looking, and it's like, what else, that type of deal. I guess the only comment I have to make, and thank you for the update in all seriousness, but, and I don't have the reports from last week, our last meeting with us, but you talk about using the grant funds to cover the TA nurses, LP nurses,
Right.
that type of deal. I guess I kind of made the comment at the last meeting that this was going to be very fluid, and it looks like this is one of the fluids that wasn't in it that's going to
Yeah.
get plugged in, so,
Hopefully we
Would
get
it-
candidates.
yeah, exactly, but I mean, I appreciate the update, and, I know everybody's working hard, and
Yep.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Ms. Amaral?
Yeah, that goes without saying, but I'll say it. Thank you. It cannot be easy. Glad it's not me. I'm glad I'm not the only one that has more questions than answers. And just so appreciative of all the work and the constant kind of navigating
Yep.
this. who thought we would still be here.
I know.
One thing, though, in terms of that test and stay program, and thinking about my own family's needs and hearing from some folks in the community who had unfortunately needed to quarantine, I think the first day of school, they told me. And, you know, all kids matter and all kids need to stay in school, but particularly our youngest kind of vulnerable kiddos who, we're not going virtual here, but who really can't attend to virtual sessions. I'm very concerned about if this were to continue on a rolling basis throughout this year. Hopefully it does not. That perhaps, and you may already have talked about this with your team, when you mentioned starting it with like the older kids who can kind of come in quickly and move on. If you haven't already, and I trust your judgment and your administration as to why things are the way they are or protocols are what they are, but me not knowing much, but knowing that it really stinks to have a child who can't attend virtually and missing class and the routine and that, you know, anticipated routine and all of the havoc that can ensue when you're not in your normal routine. If we revisit or visit the idea of maybe those younger kiddos who were prioritized in the return back, maybe also added to the try it out first with them if there is a consent, if there, you know, is a
Yeah.
case where that is a,
The only reason we said we would focus on middle and high school first, right now, like immediate, is because we have the one building. It's more difficult to think about spreading it out through the elementary. So our real thinking right now is, do we do a centralized location where they all descend on to go back to their school? Because once again, about that personnel that we can share. But that's the only reason. And I just wanted to make one other note, that because of what happened in the very beginning, first 2 days of school, as you know, social distancing is out the door. However, and we're trying to maintain as much as we can. Some classrooms, the desks are less than 3 feet, et cetera. Teachers were still already trying to do collaborative learning, et cetera. So unfortunately, they really couldn't determine with accuracy who were the close contacts. So we've shifted that immediately when we knew that, because I worked with, once again, Mr. Mishu, Kelly Stoll, our lead nurse, and they're in full agreement. So we had teachers, obviously they have to have seating charts. We've also had them do now what we call pods. So if you're going to do collaborative learning, it's like we three are assigned to that pod. That's it. You're not going to work with him and her. So those pods so it'd be much more accurate to say, no, those are the 3 kids that were in that. So we're trying to enhance protocols, because social distancing was out the door, but not really when you do a close contact. So we're hoping that will help us really decrease on the number of close contacts and need for quarantining.
thank you.
Ms. Wade?
Yes, thank you for that. And I think that, you know, first of all, again, thank you for all of your
Yep.
work. And I, you know, it's exciting to hear, and it's so important to hear about, you know, how many support networks
Right.
are being put out in each of the schools to help these kids. You know, especially who, you know, we talked about that as being so critical, and we know Google
Yep.
Classroom, but everybody, you know, having personnel too who are going to speak and work with the kids assigned, I think that's critical.
Yeah.
You know, was going to ask, because I know there's, you know, we've all heard through emails and communication that there are questions about quarantining, and I think the pods are, you know, my
Should be
daughter went through
helpful.
that. It's going to be really helpful. And, you know, another question I saw from a parent, when you are determining close contacts, if those children, and this is, I'm a little bit confused, if they're fully masked.
Club, right?
So this, I mean, we all are, but if
We're
they're
all like,
fully
"Oh."
masked and they're, you know, I'm talking to Shannon, but we're both wearing a mask. Shannon, or Dr. Jenkins, excuse me, ends up being positive. Does that mean if we've been fully masked that she's my close contact? That
Fully
was a-
masked, at least 3 feet apart in a classroom.
So we still have to be, you know, 3 feet apart
But
the
the
whole time.
problem became
Okay.
when they were in groups, maybe sitting on the floor and.
Right. Because that was a little confusing as
broke
you
the
look through the
rules.
chart, like where that is if you're fully masked. And so those were some of the questions the parents were saying, you know, if my children are still wearing, then what's the point of masks? And that's where we kind of, went through, and I can go through that whole, there's, a lot of purposes of masks, and
But
they certainly help and diminish, but we still have to adhere to that, so, okay.
Does that change, right, in the high school if the students are vaccinated? In our school,
There's
you're masked, you're
exemptions.
not distanced, but you're
Yeah.
vaccinated, you
Yep.
do not have to quarantine.
That's right.
So I'll just throw that in there,
That's
that
right.
if your child is in the high school and vaccinated,
Or
they
middle
will
school.
not,
Or
right.
middle
Or
school.
middle school,
Yeah.
yes.
School.
Please get them vaccinated.
Asymptomatic, vaccinated, mask.
Do you have to do test and stay if you're vaccinated and you're a close
They
contact?
could be
No.
exempt.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how will you record, so will students then bring in to say that, I can say, like, my child is vaccinated, are they bringing in cards? Like, how is that information being conveyed to you, and are we putting that on a file now?
That's a really good question. The nurses were under the impression, and I don't know, I haven't followed back up with Kelly, that they had access to, it's some something or other
The
database.
state database, yes.
Yeah,
We
as
have-
the health.
They should, we have
health-
access to it
Yeah,
on
so we
campus too.
think that's, and also, Kelly actually was going to do a voluntary survey. She asked if she could do that. I said, as long as it's voluntary, if people want to come forth and say, just so she might have that, but we're hoping that they have that access to that database,
And just, I know,
because they could fib.
and I know we're running a little long, but I think some parents were confused. What service does CIC Health provide, and then what do we in turn provide? Like, that's that seems to also be the question as, why were we delayed? Why were what?
Yep.
And that was mine. So.
Well, in the beginning, when we attended all this informational sessions, et cetera, was that they were going to have a program coordinator, and we could also have on-site help. Like,
what I
let's
thought.
say we had 20 kids to test. They were supposedly sending a team down to help us, so we didn't have to use all that personnel. So we weren't really waiting for that. Our big hiccup was we couldn't get access to the whole system, the consent forms, nothing. So, and it just became a big hullabaloo, but we're gonna move forward, and even if I can't get in anymore to the database for the Crush the Curve software, we'll keep a spreadsheet.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just echo my colleagues in saying thanks.
Yeah, welcome.
It's been rough, and I appreciate all the work that you've put in here.
Good
Did you have
team.
anything else to add in your report?
I don't-
I know we wanted to stop to
No,
talk about that.
just that, and another thing that Desi changed, we were told we weren't gonna have to report the positives, and that changed last week. So as of today, today's numbers will start to go into a portal. At least this year, I don't have to make phone calls every day. So, I think it will still come out on the Thursday, like last year. But that changed again. They just, as we always say, they change every week with something new, right? I don't know if you have anything about facilities or anything, or we're all set or
No, I
whatever.
think-
No? Okay. I think that's it.
All right.
That's enough.
So the next item on the agenda, if everyone's okay to move on, yeah? Is the report of the chair. I have a few things. One, we said we'd return to discussion of physical access to school committee meetings, every meeting. I think we're all in agreement. We're not there yet. Is that right? Okay, we'll move on quickly on that one. Number two, the select board contacted us about having a joint meeting on the 27th, which is when our next school committee meeting is scheduled. As is evidenced by the fact we're going on 2 hours, right? We're back to that part of the year where we have a lot on our agenda. And I know Mr. Nunes has thoughts on this. I share some of those thoughts. I might be willing to go for maybe a half hour, but I just feel like we've got a lot on our plate, and I'm just not really sure what we're getting out of this. Ms. Amaral and then Mr. Nunes.
I guess sorry to ask a question that might be obvious already, but what would be the purpose of us meeting with them?
I mean, I think it's really, go ahead, Mr. Kiley.
It was relayed to me to request your presence to discuss the town's financial policies, the upcoming budget cycle, and the town meeting that, is nearly upon us in October.
And so I'll let Mr. Nunes go first, and then I'll take up wherever he may leave off on that. Mr. Nunes?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. No. Okay? In all seriousness, number one, they're not meeting in person, so we'd have to have a Zoom meeting. So we basically would probably have to start our meeting, flip over to their meeting, finish there, go back to our meeting, again, I don't have a problem being here in meeting this length. That's not the point. But the last time we had a joint meeting with them, we were an hour and a half, if my memory's any good. And we did not get to say 2 words, except for, hi, I'm John Nunes, I'm Shannon Jenkins, right down the line. That was it. So I have no idea why they even want to. They want to talk about financial policies, even if we object to them or we have questions about them. You got the Finance Committee and the FinCom that have been working on them. We're not going to have any, 2 cents into it anyway. The budget cycle, yeah, I know it's going to be the end of September, beginning of October. And, yeah, they're already starting to think about, FY '23. I understand that. But, I mean, they can relay those to Mr. Kiley, and he can relay them to us. I'm good with that. And for town meeting, I mean, we'll all get the warrant. We probably won't be able to ask any questions, because I had some questions at the last one and never got a chance to ask them. I had to wait till town meeting to ask my questions. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I appreciate everything the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen do for us, with the capital items and things and that type of deal. Thank you very much. But to go there via Zoom for an hour and a half or however long it is, doesn't just, the ends don't justify the means, in my opinion, personally. However, this committee votes, or agrees to do, I will be there.
Yeah, I will have to say I'm inclined to agree with you, Mr. Nunes. I didn't feel like in our last meeting, the policies we discussed, our presence was necessary to that discussion. And so if there's an item that they want to discuss that's necessary to us, that hasn't already been conveyed to us through Mr. Kiley, I might be sort of inclined to do that, but I trust that Mr. Kiley does a good job of conveying, the town's schedule, the town's priorities, and all of that. And so, I mean, I would agree with Mr. Nunes. I'm inclined to go ahead with our regularly scheduled meeting. But we've got 3 other people aside from me and Mr. Nunes, so I'll hear your thoughts. Mr. Kiley, do you want to add something?
Sure. Just so you're aware, Dr. Gifford and I attended the town department head meeting this morning, which is a monthly meeting, in which they had a brief discussion regarding the town meeting agenda. One of the items included on that agenda is expanding the reserve fund and creating a larger reserve fund as a percentage of the overall town budget. So just so you know, I'm sure that was one of the things that they were going to discuss. So if you have an opinion about that, certainly
say
I could
why?
relay it. But
Did they say why?
I think it is in an effort to get positive traction on bond rating.
Okay,
That's my understanding.
okay, I'm missing something.
But
That's okay. Thank you.
Mr. Oliver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm in agreement as well. I don't think I got very much out of the last joint meeting. Obviously, thank the Select Board as well as the FinCom for their time and always supporting the school department. But once again, if there's something specific that we want to collaboratively, jointly discuss, I'm all ears. But I agree, there's just way too much going on right now, and then to switch back and forth between Zoom. But once again, if it's specific, if you find out, Mr. Kiley or Dr. Gifford, that there's something more specific around besides these general topics, I'm certainly all ears.
Yeah.
Ms. Amaro, Ms. Wade, any?
I disagree.
I mean, I think part of the problem, I do appreciate them inviting us, but, just the quick math, there's 20 people. It's just not, when you have a meeting that size, it's not particularly productive. Because to Mr. Nunes' point, right, I mean, if everybody takes 5 minutes, it's 2 hours later, and, right, you haven't gotten anywhere. So I will, if it's okay, it seems to be the sense of the committee, I will, Ms. Genther, can we respond to the Select Board and respectfully declined their invitation.
There's a pressing issue.
Yeah, unless there's a pressing issue, and I would also say, again, to getting at the size, maybe they want to do a meeting that's, just a couple people or something like that may be more productive. It just feels like when there's so many people on a meeting, you're all just kind of sitting there and a few people talk, yeah. All right, so the joint meeting, I'll cross that off. The next item I had for my report, public comment, Ms. Genther, I know you forwarded one email we received. We've all received that. You haven't received anything else? Okay, so we've
I
all
have not.
received a comment. The only other thing I'd like to say is I'd like to thank Mr. Parati and Mr. Galashaw. The microphone setup is really great now that we're back wearing masks. It's very helpful to be able to hear each other, so I'm appreciative of that.
Masks and the air purifiers.
With the air purifier, yeah. In the summer, it was hard to hear, but now with the microphones,
better.
it's much
Much better.
better. So
Thank
I
you very
very
much.
much appreciate it. I just want to say thanks for all the hard work they do here. That is it for my report. Any other matters that anyone might like to add? Mr. Nunes?
Just one quick one, Madam Chair, and I'll bring it up at our next meeting also, but people are interested, you can put October 2nd and October 23rd on your calendars. We're going to be having a U.S. band competition at the stadium on October 2nd. Right now, we've got 8 bands signed up for that. And on the 23rd, 23rd of October, we have a NESBA competition. Right now, we've got 16 bands.
Wow.
So I'll be getting a letter out to you, Dr. Shannon, Dr. Gifford, and Mr. Tebow for trophy presentations. I don't have times yet, but I'll get there.
I will not be available on the 23rd, but I should be able to make the
Okay.
2nd.
Well, we can.
Other
Mary-
items?
Mary will be in the concession. We can swipe her.
Ms. Wade, did you want to add something?
Yes, can we just, on our next agenda, make sure, I know we touched on it tonight, talking about students, and field trips, and also with the travel that we're looking at with the band and other groups, if we can, think about a discussion
Sure.
on those topics. I
Yep.
think that's important for those groups.
Ms. Gunther, did you get that? Thank you. Any other items that anyone would like to bring up? All right, so our next meeting will be here on the 27th at 6:30 at the high school. Hearing no other discussion or items, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Nunes, a second by Ms. Amaral. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone.